that you see, not only in here, but in that community.
Good morning, Madam President and Senators. Today I want to speak to you, Senators and leaders, about who is leading you. John Maxwell said, "The toughest person to lead is always yourself." I begin with 3 questions. My first question is this: Senators, when you examine yourself, do you see the real you, or do you look at yourself through tinted lenses? Can you clearly articulate the areas where you need to grow as a leader and as an individual? And can you accept advice, or are you knowledgeable about everything? First, take the time to keep growing. Senators, you will spend lots of time on policies, projects, and responsibilities. And persons are assigned to be with you and work with you. However, look clearly at yourself and be determined to always be the best version of yourself, whether you're in a crowd or by yourself. Sometimes a leader can perform and role play in an unauthentic way depending on the individuals that are present. Never be that sort of a leader. Be determined to always be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be pleased in how you have conducted yourself, treated individuals, no matter their status, and how you have spoken or have addressed others. Proverbs 3:25 and 26 states, "Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thoughts to your paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways." Someone has said, "You will never know who you are unless you shed who you pretend to be." Secondly, reflect on the strengths and personal growth opportunities and all that you bring to your new assigned position. Do you have a vision statement, a verse, or a motto that guides your life? Do you take time regularly to evaluate and examine your goals, projections, and actions? Do you speak truthfully to yourself, or do you tell yourself a lot of lies? Galatians 6:4 and 5 states, "Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load." Real, consistent, authentic, personal reflection can guide each leader to keep growing to higher heights. Never plateau. When you do, you lose your edge and you become mediocre. And finally, who has the privilege or the right to speak honestly and truthfully to you? Many times when you hold positions of influence or power, you may have very few people who will speak truthfully to you, the leader. Some will flatter you because they have an agenda or they want something from you. Others will criticize and complain because they can, and they may want to discourage you. Still others will remain silent because you, the leader, is not approachable or will not receive the information that can help you. James 1 and 19 states, "Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." And so, Senators, always cultivate a spirit of discernment so that you will know the persons who will be honest with you. They may not be your greatest friends or supporters, but if they're credible, believe them. Be a person of prayer so that you will discern the people who are around you, and you will have the wisdom to know and to understand your team. And have a trusted individual or a group who will serve as your accountability team and help you in your leadership development. I end with this quote by Thomas Paine. "A body of people holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody." I say it again. A body of people holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody. Amen. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray that our senators and all who serve and work with them will keep investing and growing as leaders. May they take the time to hear from you, or where growth is needed, and what are their strengths. May they allow trusted persons to hold them accountable, and may they be men and women of integrity, humility, and wisdom. Today, we also pray for the many in our country who mourn the losses of so many young lives in tragedy over the past few days. And so, Father, we pray for all families of our country. We pray that they will grow close to you and close to each other, and may you hold them in the palm of your hand. In Jesus' name, amen. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, senators and colleagues. Today is the morning session of the Senate, 2nd of July, 2026. Adoption of minutes.
Madam President, I move that the Senate to adopt the minutes of the meeting of Monday, the 22nd of June, 2026.
Last time we met? Monday,
Oh, sorry. To the 22nd
second to the
to the 24th of June, 2026. We were here for 3 days.
Yeah. Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meetings held on June 22nd through 24th be adopted. As many are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The minutes of June 22nd to 24th, 2026 are hereby adopted. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign. Swearing in of new senators. Communications by the President. Senators, this past weekend, 2 tragic car accidents occurred on Church and Shirley Street in Nassau and East Sunrise Highway in Freeport, Grand Bahama. It is with deep sorrow and a profound sense of loss that I convey heartfelt condolences on the loss of 6 beautiful young women, 6 young daughters filled with promise, purpose, determination, and zest, all cut short of their destiny. On behalf of the Senate body, I hereby extend our sincerest sympathies to the bereaved families, their loved ones, friends, and all who have been affected by this devastating tragedy. The timely loss of these young lives is a matter of great grief, not only to their immediate circles, but to this entire nation as a whole. As this nation mourns, let us hold the bereaved in our thoughts and prayers, and may they be granted strength, solace, and comfort through the support of their communities during this most difficult time. We also offer our thoughts and prayers and financial support and hope for a speedy recovery to the individuals who are still in the hospital recuperating. The chair now requests a moment of silence for for the lives of these precious souls. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. The chair also extends condolences on the passing of Mother Khadija Farrakhan, the First Lady of the Nation of Islam, who lies in state today in a mosque in Chicago. She was a devoted wife of over 70 years to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the loving mother of 9 children, and a devout follower of the Nation of Islam. Mother Khadija leaves a remarkable legacy. She was a woman of great faith, quiet strength, tender heart, and good-natured, and remained a pillar of strength for her community and the Nation of Islam. And to the Nation of Islam, I say, Assalamu alaikum. It is officially summertime here throughout the world, and thousands of students all over the country are on summer break. I encourage all students to resist the urge to stay at home with electronic gadgets, but rather to get involved with various activities that are planned with you in mind. Just let me remind you of a few. There are summer schools, vacation Bible schools, urban renewal programs, summer job placements with various government ministries, constituency programs, and the list goes on. Make summer 2026 count in a meaningful way. Although summer can be fun and exciting for many, regrettably, the reality is that many young boys and girls will fall prey to physical and sexual abuse. I urge parents, grandparents, and guardians to pay careful attention to your children's whereabouts, safety, and who's looking after them while you are away from home. Ensure that you communicate with your children and encourage them to converse with you about their day and the activities that they are involved in. Teach them again what is good touching and what is bad touching, and what to do when someone touches them in an inappropriate manner. Teach them again what is good and healthy conversation, and what to do when the conversation goes beyond the acceptable boundaries. Teach our innocent children again of the dangers of social media and chatting with persons unknown to them. Teach them again to have boundaries. Teach them again to not allow anyone to touch them, to not allow anyone to put them down. Teach them again to flee from danger. Teach them again to say no to drugs. Teach them again to stand up to the bully and to tell someone. Teach them again to be kind, courteous, and thoughtful. Always remind your children that you are simply a phone call away and that you're never too busy to just talk. Ensure that you stay abreast of their physical, emotional, and mental health. I also encourage the village to be on full alert. If you see something, say something. And as the good book reminds us, that we ought to be a brother's keeper. Let us all continue to work together, be vigilant, and consistently recommitted to a culture of care where the protection of our most precious resource is our main focus, which stimulates the heart of our collective conscience. Finally, Bahamas, it would be remiss of me, the chair, if I did not take this opportunity to caution motorists all over this land to drive carefully. Drive with due care and attention. Don't speed. Slow down. Don't drink and drive. Wear your seatbelts. Don't text and drive. Give up your right of way on the road if necessary. And motorcyclists, please drive responsibly. We all want to arrive alive. And just want to mention, I saw one of my little young friends in the gallery, and I'd like for him to please stand. Leonardo Ewing. Did he step down? You stepped out, okay. I'll allow, Senator Johnson, I'll allow you to take care of young Leonardo Ewing. I'll still introduce him, though. He's an 8th grade student at T.A. Thompson, and he is a friend to many. I can't tell you the amount of places I go, and he just shows up. Just shows up saying, hi, how are you doing? Oh, there he is. Leonardo, remain standing, please. I met him a few months back, and he just came on over to me and said, hi, how are you doing? And we started a conversation, and we've been friends ever since. He calls and checks upon me. Imagine that. Thank you. Have a seat. Thank you. And thank you for coming to today's proceedings. I hope that you find it educational. And I just want to, in closing, may God continue to bless each of you senators and your families, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Here ends the President's communication. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly. Laying of documents by the ministers. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate 5 documents. The first is the miscellaneous written law rectification number 8, Order 2026.
Order document be brought up. Order document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I beg leave to lay on the table the Price Control General Amendments number 6 Regulation 2026.
Order document be brought up. Order document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I beg leave to lay on the table the Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock 2029, 2031, 2034, 2036, 2049, and 2054. Number 3, Directions 2026.
Order document be brought up. Order document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
I beg leave to lay on the table a copy of the annual report for the year 2021 to 2022 of the National Health Insurance Authority.
Order that the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
And lastly, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the annual report for 2023 of the National Health Insurance Authority.
Order document be brought up. Order document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
No further laying of documents.
Communications by ministers.
No communications by ministers.
Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Presentations of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills.
No first reading of bills.
Second reading of bills.
No second reading of bills.
Committee of the whole. Third reading and passing of bills.
No third reading of bills.
For the third reading. I'm sorry. Consideration of House amendments. Resolutions. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Keenan Johnson.
Madam President, I'll always try to start off on a light note when I stand on this occasion. So I was trying to figure out what I would say today, but since you mentioned it, Mr. Ewing, I thought I'd share just a brief story of how I met Mr. Ewing. And I thought it was funny that Senator the Honorable Rick Fox, as soon as you said Mr. Ewing, he said, "Oh, MJ." And so that's what he's affectionately known as. But I met Mr. Ewing at a party at the opening of Parliament at Balmoral. He asked me and my wife for a ride home. And it was about 11 o'clock, so I was still trying to figure out how this 12-year-old was out at 11 o'clock. But what was so funny was on the ride home, this was the day before I was meant to be at the Ministry of Education to do my first walkabout. And Mr. Ewing was able to tell me what time I was supposed to be there. And I thought that was so interesting because he said, "Aren't you supposed to be with the Deputy Prime Minister at the Ministry of Education tomorrow?" And I hadn't even gotten that communication yet. So this young man is extremely brilliant. He's a perfect example of the public education school system. And I asked him, I said, you know, I'm going to encourage you to watch me in the Senate. But he said he prefers to see it in person. And so here he is today. And so, Madam President, before I also go to the passing or moving for the resolution regarding the Governor General's speech from the throne, I also wish to echo some of the sentiments that you raised. I also wish to extend my condolences to the family of those who lost those young lives over the past week, and also extend my prayers to those who are recovering in the hospital. And I also wish to echo your sentiments regarding the summer. It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention some of the programs that the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology are hosting. And so we have our extended learning program, which actually starts next week. And that's for persons who are interested in gaining a bit more in our core subjects, mathematics and language arts. We are also promoting a national reading program. And so we've actually published a list of books that we're encouraging parents and guardians to encourage their to encourage their children to read during the summer, so that they keep their minds and brains active. And tomorrow I have the honor of opening the National Summer Employment Program, which is going to be at Stephen Dillett. And I'm happy to be able to see young persons from the age of 15 be able to engage in some level of positive activity while they get paid a few extra dollars to do so. Madam President, the speech from the throne places a clear responsibility on all of us who now have a role to play in its execution. And so I am happy to move today for the passing of the resolution thanking the Governor General for the speech. And I approach that with the responsibility in mind. Madam President, the speech reminds us that the Bahamian people have made a deliberate choice. They chose continuity, they chose stability, and they chose progress. And for those of us now called to serve, that choice carries an obligation. It means we must keep moving forward. We must reach more people. We must take a real and practical difference. We must make a real and practical difference in the lives of Bahamians. Madam President, in my capacity as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology, I want to focus my contribution on one central idea, that the future we are building depends on how we prepare our people to participate in it. In my budget contribution just weeks ago, I spoke about education as the strongest bridge between today's challenges and tomorrow's prosperity. I return to that idea briefly, but in a different context today, because the speech from the throne places before us a broader national mission to build the Bahamas for Bahamians. And if that is the mission, Madam President, then education, skill, and opportunity must sit at the center of it. Madam President, at the heart of the government's education agenda, as outlined in the speech, is a simple but powerful principle: that every Bahamian child deserves access to modern, high-quality education, regardless of geography or circumstance. That statement, Madam President, speaks directly to the everyday experience of many families across our islands. It speaks to the student on a family island who must have the same chance as a student in New Providence. It speaks to the child whose potential is not defined by where they start. So, Madam President, our task is to ensure that this principle is not simply stated, but that it is delivered. Madam President, before I go further, I wish to recognize the Director of Education, Mrs. Dominique McCartney-Russell, and her team. This month, they held the inaugural induction of the students into the Bahamas Public Students of Distinction Society. To qualify for induction, students were required to meet rigorous standards, to maintain a cumulative GPA of 3.5, earn at least 4 BJCs with a pass of at least a C, hold leadership roles in multiple clubs, maintain at least 85% attendance and punctuality, attain 8 or more BGCSEs, including math and language, and achieve an SAT score of at least 1,200 or an ACT score of at least 20. Suffice it to say, Madam President, this was around the time I was in high school. I wouldn't have been allowed to, or inducted, or qualified. But nonetheless, despite these demanding requirements, 72 students met that mark. And even more noteworthy, Madam President, I'm sure the Honorable Dr. Johnson would appreciate this as well, that included in those students were members and students from Grand Bahama and the Family Islands. Madam President, that tells us that excellence exists across this country. It tells us that when expectations are clear and support is present, our students can rise to meet them. Madam President, as we continue this work, we also recognize the foundation that has already been laid. I wish to acknowledge the former Minister of Education, the Honorable Glenys Hanna Martin, for the emphasis placed on literacy and numeracy during her tenure. That emphasis was necessary, and it gave us a strong base on which to build. As we move forward, our focus must expand to include skills that are increasingly required in a modern-day economy. That includes digital literacy and financial literacy. These are no longer optional skills, Madam President. They are essential tools for the participation in today's world. Whether a young person chooses to pursue university education, technical training, entrepreneurship, or immediate entry into the workforce, these competencies are essential. Madam President, another key element of our approach is recognizing that there are multiple pathways to success. For too long, success was defined too narrowly. Today, we are working to ensure that students can pursue academic, technical, vocational, and creative pathways based on their strengths and interests. The continued development of special education diplomas, as well as technical and vocational diplomas, is part of that broader effort to create a more inclusive and responsive system. Madam President, that broader approach to success is also reflected in creative arts. I saw that very clearly just a few days ago. On June 28th, I attended the graduation of students from the Creative and Performing Arts School. What I witnessed there, Madam President, was talent, but it was also transformation. Students who entered that program developed their skills, built their confidence, and found a pathway forward. Graduates received certificates and diplomas, and many of them will now move on to begin their Bachelor of Arts degrees. And at the end of the ceremony, Madam President, the graduates performed. The standard was high, the confidence was evident, and the sense of pride, not only among the graduates, but also among their families, was unmistakable. That experience reinforced something important, Madam President. When we create avenues for people to develop their talents, the results will speak for themselves. Madam President, the speech from the throne also speaks to the government's commitment to lifelong learning through initiatives such as Upskill Bahamas. That commitment recognizes a simple reality that I mentioned in my budget contribution, which is that education does not end when the student leaves school. In a world that is changing as rapidly as ours, adults must also have opportunities to learn, to reskill, and to reposition themselves for new opportunities. Whether it is a young person seeking their first job, a mid-career worker adapting to a changing industry, or an individual returning to the workforce, access to training and upskilling must be available. And as we speak about access and quality across the system, we must also speak honestly about the need for more teachers in our classrooms. Yes. Madam President, amid the national teacher shortage, I also wish to join the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, Science and Technology in making a direct appeal to educators who are not currently teaching, and to the recently retired teachers who may still be in a position to assist. We need you. Our schools need you. And most importantly, our children need you. If you are in a position to assist, I encourage you to contact the ministry. There's still a place for your experience, your guidance, and your contribution in helping to shape the next generation. Madam President, education, skills development, and opportunity are closely linked to another major pillar outlined in the speech from the throne, and that is the modernization of labor laws. Given my involvement in the process leading to the development of these reforms, I wish to highlight a few areas that are particularly significant and give a clear sense of the direction that we are working towards. The proposed expansion of maternity leave reflects a recognition that families require support, especially in the early stages of a child's life. The introduction of paternity leave acknowledges that fathers play a huge role and that supporting families requires a balanced approach. The inclusion of provisions relating to leave for parents adopting a child recognizes the different ways in which families are formed, and the introduction of mental wellness leave signals an understanding that productivity and well-being are connected. Madam President, these reforms stand together as part of a broader effort to ensure that the workplace reflects the realities of modern life. They recognize workers as individuals with responsibilities, challenges, and aspirations. Madam President, before I leave this area on labor, I wish to address a point made by the Honorable Senator Ellsworth Johnson during his budget debate. He suggested that rents are rising and wages are not. With respect, Madam President, I believe this statement is inaccurate. Under the Davis administration, the minimum wage increased from $210 to $260. And I believe that even prior to that, it was the PLP administration that raised it to $210. In addition to this, many workers and public servants have benefited from improved wages, benefits, and protections through the 60-plus industrial agreements signed under our Davis administration. Madam President, he also indicated that unemployment rate sits somewhere between 9.3 to 9.5%. While there is still work to be done, Madam President, and while we remain committed to bringing unemployment down further, the latest release from the Bahamas National Statistical Institute, issued on June 30th, states that the unemployment rate stood at 8.7% after its last survey results. Madam President, the facts must always be stated accurately. And when the facts are stated accurately, what becomes clear is that the government is pursuing a direction centered on opportunity, protection, and progress for all Bahamians. Madam President, as we move forward, the focus must remain on delivery. The promises set out in the speech from the throne must be matched by action. Agreed. For those of us in positions of responsibility, that is the standard by which we will be judged. So, Madam President, as I make this motion, I wish to also be clear again. I support the speech from the throne, I thank the Governor General, and I reaffirm my commitment to playing my part in ensuring that the vision outlined is realized. Thank you, Madam President.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Keenan Johnson. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Clint Watson. Thank you, Senator Johnson, for your contribution. Senator Clint Watson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me first join the sentiments which you have expressed in echoing sympathy to the families who are suffering. Indeed, the nation suffers, but you can only imagine what they are feeling with the loss of such hope and possibility. And I want them to know that the prayers of this Senate, this government, the people of the Bahamas are with them today as they indeed face some of the darkest days of their life. You know, the good thing about it is we recognize that tough times will come. The good book, the Bible, speaks about it. But we thank God that there is an advocate, Father, who gives you strength when you are weak. Yes. And in times of weaknesses, his strength is made perfect. Yes. And I encourage all of us, the entire country, those who are hurting, to remember that you can lean on an understanding that is greater than all of us, a power that is greater than all of us, that can take you through the most difficult times and bring the kind of peace that only he can give. And our prayers and thoughts remain with them at this hour. Madam President, the Prime Minister at this hour is at the University of the Bahamas, addressing an exciting group of young people on an area that I spoke about last time when I took my rise, and that is, of course, climate change. Every year, he ensures that he's on that agenda for the Youth Climate Change Summit to ensure that the next generation, those coming up, understand the importance of protecting our heritage, protecting our country, protecting our environment, protecting the Bahamas. He doesn't do it because he's looking for votes. They possibly can't vote. Elections are over. He does it because he understands that unless we build the next generation with the understanding of the seriousness of the consequences that we face in our environment, we want to have protectors of our environment like we do today. I thought it important to start my contribution with that because that is exactly what the speech from the throne is about. Not just talking about topics that you hope to do, but actually doing the work and carrying out the assignment to bring about change in our country. Madam President, the speech from the throne is much more than a constitutional formality. It is a blueprint for governance. It is a declaration of intent. More importantly, it demonstrates that this administration is not content with merely managing the affairs of government. Rather, it is determined to fundamentally transform how government serves the Bahamian people. One word comes to mind when I examine the legislative agenda before us, and it is intentionality. Nothing in this agenda is accidental. Nothing. Nothing is reactionary. Every proposal has been carefully crafted to move the Bahamas away from outdated systems and toward a modern, innovative, and resilient nation equipped to compete in the 21st century. For far too long, governments have been content to administer yesterday's solutions to today's challenges. This administration has chosen a different course. It understands that the future cannot be built with the tools of the past. And as I say that, I want to pause right here, Madam President, and highlight a camp that's going on right now that I had the opportunity to share with the young people yesterday. And it's being put on by the Ministry of Social Services and the Department of Disability Affairs. And it's called Camp Inclusion. Go figure. And it's being hosted at Good News Seventh-day Adventist Church in Flamingo Gardens, right on the border of the Southern Shores constituency and Carmichael. And I went there yesterday and saw young people from all over, private schools, public schools, differently abled, everyone together in camp. And as I look at the theme called Camp Inclusion, it's just that. The Ministry of Social Services has created a camp, first of all, that includes everyone, regardless of your ability. And not just that, but the classes are all geared towards teaching people to respect and to appreciate everyone's difference. Now, how important is that in our country, right? Where we've seen so much discrimination, particularly against those who are differently abled. But you're now teaching young people to appreciate that not everyone's the same. People are different. It is the most exciting camp. My daughter is a part of the camp. She went because her auntie is a part of putting it on. And I ask her every day, how are you enjoying it? She's going crazy about it. She loves it. Yesterday she came home and she started to talk to me in sign language because she's learning sign language so that they can communicate. She's learning that more than just a clap of applause, you can do this in sign language, which is the same thing as applause. I thought it was revolutionary when I spoke to the organizer from Social Services, she's a director, about the importance of this camp. She said to me, we are thinking out of the box. We are trying to find ways to ensure that our country grows in a mature place and our young people understand and appreciate that everyone is different and how we can still succeed with our differences. That is what I'm talking about, Madam President, when I talk about a government that's looking for creative ways to lead and to bring its people along the way of leadership and to educate them. And so I salute Camp Inclusion and the Department of Social Services and the Ministry of Social Services for putting on camps like these for young people to be involved. And I'll tell you, for far too long we've seen this way of governance and the tools don't match. And that is why the establishment of the Ministry of Innovation and National Development is perhaps one of the most significant institutional reforms proposed in this legislative program. Some may see it as simply creating another ministry. They would be mistaken. This ministry represents a new philosophy of governance. It recognizes that economic development, technological advancement, infrastructure planning, environmental sustainability, institutional reform, and human development cannot continue in isolated silos. They must work together under a coherent national vision if we are to build a stronger Bahamas. That is important, Madam President, because no longer can ministries operate, as we just said, in silos. They have to work together. You will see in this term of the Davis administration more collaboration cross ministries. I'm excited, and you're going to hear more about it soon. It's happening even in the office of the Prime Minister, with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, working together on projects together, going cross ministries to ensure that everyone understands what we're doing and everyone who has a part in what we're doing is involved. Before, we had governments where you were separated. And so there were no formal conclusions, no formal results from what we did because we didn't talk to each other. That's not going to happen in this term. We're talking to each other. We're working across ministries to ensure that the results are positive and powerful for our country. Some may see it as simply creating, as I said, another ministry of innovation, but it's actually bringing together all of these areas to ensure there is success, especially if we're to build a stronger Bahamas. Successful countries throughout the world no longer wait for change to happen to them. They plan for it, they prepare for it, and they position themselves to benefit from it. That is precisely what the government is doing. Madam President, another transformative proposal is to introduce legislation to establish a national development framework. This is long overdue. For decades, development has often been fragmented. Ministries have pursued objectives independently. Agencies have sometimes worked without sufficient coordination. Islands have experienced varying levels of development without an overarching national strategy. The National Development Framework changes that. It provides continuity beyond election cycles. It provides coordination across government. It provides certainty for investors, which is so important. And most importantly, it provides the Bahamian people with confidence that development will no longer occur by chance, but through careful planning and deliberate execution.
Yes, yes.
This administration understands that sustainable development is never accidental.
No.
It is designed, it is measured, it is monitored, it is accountable. Madam President, the government's commitment to advancing a national master physical development plan deserves equal recognition. For the first time in our nation's history, we are moving toward a comprehensive infrastructural blueprint that encompasses our entire archipelago.
Yes.
That matters because our family islands deserve the same level of thoughtful planning as New Providence.
Yes.
Our communities deserve roads that anticipate future growth rather than react to congestion. Our ports, airports, utilities, housing developments, schools, social services, and healthcare facilities should be designed as part of a single national vision rather than as disconnected projects. That's why I'm so excited about the new Minister of Social Services. She's going to be talking real soon about some great things. We've heard her talk about in her speech, in her contribution to the budget, about being able to alleviate poverty. And we wonder, well, how is it going to happen? She has some exciting plans because she's talking to people from other ministries on how to ensure that the basic needs are being addressed in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. She ain't doing it only in her ministry. She's talking across to the Ministry of Innovation and National Development, talking across to the Ministry of Housing, talking to the Ministry of Works to ensure that when the solution is designed to alleviate poverty, it is effective and it impacts the least among us. That is what we are doing. The government is committed to that national technology, physical development plan that recognizes the importance of making sure that people are equal in the country and in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I'll tell you, when we improve our ports and airports, utilities, social services, housing, when we improve all of that, who benefits? The people. And isn't that who we work for? We work for the people. This is exactly the kind of long-term thinking that mature democracies embrace. This is nation building in its truest sense. Madam President, another area where this administration continues to distinguish itself is transparency and accountability. The government will continue the work that previous administrations hesitated to complete by expanding and fully implementing the Freedom of Information Act. This is not simply administrative reform, it is democratic reform. True democracy flourishes when citizens have access to information. Transparency strengthens public confidence. Openness discourages corruption. Accountability improves governance. By ensuring that public bodies maintain trained freedom of information officers and effective disclosure systems, this government is strengthening the relationship between citizens and the state. That is progress, real progress. Madam President, throughout this debate, much has been said about the direction of our country. Truth is that the Bahamian people have already rendered their verdict on that. We knew what happened on May 12. They spoke with clarity. They examined the record. They considered the alternatives. And they overwhelmingly entrusted the Progressive Liberal Party under the leadership of Prime Minister Philip Edward Brave Davis with another mandate to govern. That mandate was not given lightly. It was earned. It was earned because Bahamians have seen school repaired. They have seen investments being attracted. They have seen historic levels of social assistance. They have seen unprecedented investments in healthcare, education, housing, and infrastructure. They have witnessed economic recovery following one of the most difficult periods in our nation's history. Most importantly, they have experienced a government that has remained focused on people rather than politics. Now, Madam President, it don't take much to consider. If you are building a house, or if you're living in your house, and your cabinets have been run down for a couple years, and they look at it rotting, and you need to be able to get some new cabinets, and you bring somebody in who gives you new cabinets, and they look good, it feels good, it gets the job done good. Well, 10 years later, if you got to replace those cabinets, who are you going to go back to? The cabinet maker who did a good job for you, got the job done, or somebody who keeps talking about what they could do for you, but you have no proof on what they could have done. That is what we're likening it to. The fact that the Bahamian people saw, they said, well, I have seen work that has been done. I have seen some things that have benefited the Bahamian people. So I'm willing to give the government a second term because I've seen the progress. Yes. I've seen the difference. Yes. I feel the difference. Yes. Yes. I feel the difference. Yes. You know, I keep telling people, no matter how much you talk about tough times, every drive-through full, every fast food restaurant, you know, people on the weekends go out. Why? Right. They have money in their pocket to spend. Money in their pocket. Ain't nobody staying locked up. Ain't nobody staying at home because they ain't got no disposable income. They are spending. Listen, you can't get a ticket out of this country. You can't get a flight. They're traveling. Things are good. They're traveling. This is a summer. They are traveling. You know, it's a hot summer. It's a hot summer. It's a hot summer. But guess what? People are burning their air conditions. Why? Because they have the ability and they have the disposable income. They feel good. They feel good about it. That is progress. They're happy. That is progress. Because there's a government that's in place that cares about them. So the unprecedented investments that we're seeing will continue in this time. Madam President, listen. Not everyone will support every policy. And that is the nature of democratic governance. Yes. But elections ultimately measure public confidence. Yes. Elections ultimately measure public confidence. The Bahamian people have renewed their confidence because they believe this government is moving the nation in the right direction. When you speak with ordinary Bahamians in our settlements, our churches, our sporting events, our marketplaces, you hear some very common sentiments. There is optimism. There is confidence. There is a belief that the Bahamas is moving forward. For the first time in many years, Bahamians can genuinely see, feel, and experience progress. Not because everything has been completed, not because every challenge has disappeared, but because they clearly see the difference in which this government is taking the country. Governing in the 21st century, Madam President, requires courage. It requires leadership who is willing to challenge outdated assumptions. It requires government that embrace innovation rather than resist it. It requires institutions that evolve alongside technology, global economics, climate realities, and citizens' changing expectations. That is precisely what this administration is doing. This legislative agenda is not about maintaining the status quo. It is about transforming it. It is about modernizing our institutions. It is about planning rather than reacting. It is about innovation rather than stagnation. It is about building systems that will serve not only today's Bahamians, but future generations. Our children deserve a country that thinks beyond the next budget. They deserve a government that plans beyond the next election. They deserve institutions that are prepared for a digital economy, resilient against climate change, transparent in their operations, and inclusive in their opportunities. That is a vision outlined in this speech from the throne. It is ambitious, it is forward-looking, it is practical. And above all, it reflects confidence in the limitless potential of the Bahamian people. Madam President, history rarely remembers governments simply for preserving what existed. History remembers governments that had the courage to transform their nations. I firmly believe that this administration has chosen that path. It is choosing reform over complacency, planning over improvisation, innovation over inertia, progress over politics. And it's for these reasons, and with full confidence in the vision outlined by Her Excellency, the Governor General, and the leadership of Prime Minister Philip Davis, I proudly lend my wholehearted support to the speech from the throne and commend it to this honorable Senate. May God bless this Parliament. May He bless our beloved Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I second this motion.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Clint Watson, for your contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Just 8 days ago, the Bahamian people chose progress. They did so in a manner not seen in a generation. In an historic vote, for the first time since 1997, the Bahamian people returned an administration to office for a consecutive term. The outcome carries a greater significance beyond the political achievement. It reflects public support that the country should continue in the direction started. It reflects public desire to continue to bring about profound changes in the country. And most of all, it reflects the considered judgment of people who, after weighing the challenges before the nation and recognizing the progress achieved over the past term, chose continuity, stability, and steady leadership for the future of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Resolved that a humble address be presented to Her Excellency the Governor General, thanking her for a most gracious speech at the opening of Parliament. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ulrich Fox.
It's awesome. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Madam President, I rise to make my contribution to address in reply to the speech from the throne. Yes. As I rise, I speak about something near and dear to my heart also, the Bahamian dream. Madam President, I must confess something. As Senator Watson just celebrated the exciting level of progress in the country, I'm on a second 8 count, because I don't know if that's thoroughly felt across the landscape fully. Not at all. But I will allow him his experience and hope that many others are celebrating and experiencing what he shares. Madam President, though, and Clint, you spoke about my eyes every once in a while. I got to give you the eyes on those comments right now. So, Madam President, I've had a lot of big dreams in my 56 years of life, but not once, not in one single moment in time did I ever dream that I would get a 3-month vacation after 1 month of work. I don't even know how to pack for that. 1 month, I hope we continue to work, Senator Watson, because the Bahamian people will be continuing to work. They don't get 3 months off.
Madam Speaker. Madam President.
Well, wait for me to recognize you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Wayne Monroe.
This Senate has not set any date. This Senate will not adjourn to any particular date. Senator Fox may find that he is working all of summer, unlike what happens in every parliament everywhere in the English Commonwealth.
Thank you, Senator Monroe, for your clarification. Senator Fox, can you please proceed?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Monroe. That is a much welcome. That is a much welcomed
every day you don't
piece of news. I think I will sign up first and foremost for a lot of work this summer. If you will be here,
Yes,
I'm for it.
every
The
day.
Bahamian people surely need it. Someone's got to run the country, correct?
Point of order, my lady. Sorry.
Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Johnson. Ellsworth
the
Johnson.
statements
What is
made
the nature
by-
of your interruption, please?
Misleading. The statement made by Mr. Monroe. My learned friend very well knows that the
Senator in this chamber.
Senator, the Honorable Wayne Monroe knows quite well that the law house has taken leave, and that it is customary that the upper house follows suit, and that there will be a break for the summer holidays. So when my learned friend, when Senator Fox says that we're going on a break, he's quite right. He's almost echoing one of a statement made in 2017 when the then Minnis administration took government in May of 2017. And the side opposite, when it was announced that we would take the summer break, indicated that we were going on a vacation only just after receiving a mandate. And so the spirit and intent of this place is that when the lower house takes a break, it would also follow suit. And we know quite well that over the summer holidays, there will be very little of anything coming from the lower house. And so he knows quite well that we will be on a break for the summer.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Ellsworth Johnson. Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Madam President, I don't know if the side opposite realizes what not maintaining the status quo means. The Senate, we always move to adjourn sine die. That means you can be called back the next day. The rules of this place means that our bills can start here. What the people do in the lower house is up to them. I can warn the Senate that in the ministry that I occupy, they may be coming back to do work in the period that the lower house is adjourned. Bills can start in the Senate. They don't necessarily start in the lower house. For the edification of the Bahamian people, the government of the Bahamas is made up of 3 separate parts: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. Over the summer, every minister of government will be in office, running the country. This place is set with passing laws. There are laws in place, so if we need to pass a law to meet some C-FATF requirement, this place will be called back to work in the summer, because we will be adjourned sine die. We are not like them. And I put this place on notice so that everyone can be clear. I haven't looked at what it will take for the House to be recalled before the date that it has adjourned to. But this place, out of an abundance of caution, never adjourns and will not adjourn while I lead government business here to a set date. We will always adjourn, so we will always be on call. And as doctors know, being on call means you better be ready every day. And I do issue that warning to my colleagues.
Madam,
Thank you, Senator
Madam
Monroe.
President, yes,
Chair recognizes
Yes.
Senator Honorable Ellsworth Johnson. This is the last intervention I'm going to receive on this point.
guided, Madam President.
Yes.
My line of fright is Senator, the Honorable Mr. Monroe is quite right, but I spoke to what is customary. And like the Senate, the Honorable House of Assembly is, even though they go on a recess, can be called back. But I speak to what is customary. And while Senator Monroe may say what he feels and how he intends to run, there are rules of this place, and he doesn't govern it. And I didn't say that he suggested, but just put that out there, that we quite well know, see, the ordinary average man knows, and we know what will happen today. We'll go on a break. I don't care what legal or political gymnastics we try to apply to it. We know what's going to happen. And yes, all of us will continue to work and prepare for the next setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ellsworth Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Please proceed, Senator Ulrich Fox.
Senator Johnson, you are my learned friend. And to Senator Monroe, that's the Wayne Monroe I grew up with and know. So it's nice to know that you are still on the job 24/7 and that you will pull all us along with you for the betterment of our country and the Bahamian dream. Again, though, I do not know whether any of us have earned or done enough in the last month to deserve a vacation quite yet. Madam President, that would have been the shortest season I've ever played in. 1 month. Quite frankly, I was just getting warmed up. Honestly, I don't think any of us, like I said, have earned that right to have that vacation. So I want to just ask you, in the effort of, and maybe Senator Monroe has cleared this up a little bit, but Madam President, I need to know, because in the off season I'm used to coming in and getting shots up, getting reps up, practicing to be better ready for the next season. Do they lock the Senate doors here in the off season? Like, are you allowed to come in and sit, practice your ups and downs, your point of orders? Like, I'd like to get better between now and, I hear September 16th. Madam President? We can discuss it. Okay, I just want to make sure I don't get pulled away. Yeah. Yeah.
Madam President, I can help my childhood friend, Senator Fox, that over any break taken, my office will be pushing out any number of proposed bills for consultation. And this government believes in consultation, and we don't believe that we just discuss it here for the first time. And so just as you keep in shape during the off-season, we will be encouraging the side opposite to keep in shape by working on providing honest consultation on the raft of legislation that will be available for consultation over whatever length of break there is. Consulting on the bills that come to this House is also a part of the job of a senator.
Thank you, Senator. The Honorable Wayne Monroe. Senator Ulrich Fox, can you please proceed?
Madam President, now that we've gotten, or I've gotten maybe, a little more of a Senate 101 from Senator Monroe, I digress. Let me turn to more serious notes. Before I go any further, I beg your leave to pay my respects to the families of the many young women who have lost their lives this past week. That is no small occurrence in our country. My prayers are with them and their families as we go forward here, supporting them at this most troubling time, and may their souls rest in peace. And may we in this chamber never grow numb to the loss of our youth, because every one of them carried a dream, a Bahamian dream. On a lighter note, Madam President, I'd also like to send my gratitude to the U.S. Ambassador Herschel Walker for his hospitality and for the invitation to join many of my colleagues here the other night at the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the United States independence. It was quite an evening. Saw many of my colleagues. It was nice to socialize in a light setting. The relationship between our two countries, Madam President, is long and a deep one. And I want to wish our neighbors to the north a happy and blessed independence. As I listened to the speeches that night, the Prime Minister in particular spoke of the American dream and the values it represents. Madam President, the American dream is something I know intimately because it was a bridge to my Bahamian dream. America gave me an education, opportunity, a career, a wife, and grew my family. I know how powerful that bridge can be when you cross it the right way. But here is what struck me, Madam President, amid all of that American celebration, in my time spent with the ambassador over that week. He kept talking about one Bahamian. He was talking about the Governor General, Dame Cynthia Mother Pratt. He told me how moved he was to learn of her story. And actually, Senator Johnson, he actually contributed to purchasing a number of her books for a summer program for young Bahamians. I think that is exceptionally exciting to hear of your program, and I'd like to contribute to that as well. And maybe we contribute Mother Pratt's book along with other books that are being contributed. She is one, in her book, From Pit to the Palace. She tells her story of her life. Madam President, that title says everything. From a humble home in Coconut Grove to the highest office in the land on the hill at Mount Fitzwilliam, that is not just Mother Pratt's story. That is the Bahamian dream, wearing a face and a name. When we talk about a woman who refused to let circumstances write her ending, we're talking about Cynthia Mother Pratt. Yep. She is not only the Bahamian dream, she is Bahamian excellence. And Madam President, this is not just my opinion. Only weeks ago, the nation opened up Dame Cynthia Mother Pratt's Legacy Hall, a living record of that very journey from the pit to the palace. MJ, you should read the book, all right? We'll get it for you. We built her a hall. Now let me tell you what else we should build her. Her life reminds us of a truth we too often forget, that where you begin does not decide where you end. Or as she puts it herself, it is not where you live that defines you, it's what lives inside of you, MJ. That is the Bahamian dream. Now, I don't know if you knew this, and I certainly just learned it, but one of my favorite facts about Mother Pratt is that she was a basketball player, Madam President. And not just any basketball player. She was one of our best women basketball players. She actually played on the national team. And it's exciting to me to learn that she had her own hoop dreams long before I had mine. And quite frankly, Madam President, it does not surprise me that she rose to a level of excellence in basketball. Quite frankly, had Mother Pratt wanted to become the first Bahamian woman drafted into the WNBA as the #1 pick, she would have done it. And granted, that would have been long before there was even such a thing as the WNBA. They probably would have built the league for her. That's how good she would have been. She had no ceiling. She had no limit. She had no cap on where she was going in life. And that probably, to me, would have been the most exciting thing to know, that she had done something and blazed a trail such as that in hoops. Madam President, that's what excellence looks like. That is what a Bahamian dream of excellence looks like. Now, Madam President, let me tell you about my drive home, though, from the U.S. Embassy on Friday night. I drove down Shirley Street going west. As a kid, I drove down Shirley Street going east. But this time I'm going west. And I looked up the government house, and I thought of Mother Pratt. And the way I've looked up there hundreds of times driving by. But I got confused this time because something was missing. There used to be a statue there. A man who they tell us growing up in school, in the history books, who himself had a dream. I don't know, maybe one of my colleagues can help me out here. What happened to the Christopher Columbus statue? There used to be one, right? I'm not imagining this, right? There used to be one. Does anyone know where it went? Does anyone know where it went? It was defaced. Oh, okay. Well, look, I know, I know we no longer celebrate Christopher Columbus Day. We now have National Heroes Day, correct? So I guess I just have a question. Are we done with Christopher Columbus? I mean, does this mean he no longer discovered us? I'm asking. This was his dream.
Senator Fox.
Yes.
Fox. Just before you go down the wrong road,
No,
you're supposed to be speaking to the chair
Yes, sorry.
and not asking
Okay,
senators questions,
Madam President,
because
sorry.
then that gets them talking to you,
Yes.
and it gets you talking to them, and you all have a conversation without the chair, with you addressing the chair. So
Madam President, Senate
please
102.
resist that urge,
Senate 102, Madam
because
President.
they may give you some answers you may not like,
Uh-huh.
especially your childhood friend.
I actually like the answer I got, quite frankly. I actually like it. I was just wanting to know if the statue was gone, Madam President, are they fixing it? Will they bring it back? I mean, what's exactly the message? Madam President, hold on. Hold on.
Get me laughing.
Hold on. Hold on. Hold on.
Even of me laughing.
Y'all are jumping ahead, Madam President. Madam President. Madam President, I think they're jumping ahead. I think they
You have the president laughing. I'm supposed to be Senator Rocks. You have the president laughing. I'm supposed to be stoic. Get your childhood friend on the floor laughing. All the senators are laughing. Chair recognizes
Madam
Senator Honorable Wayne
President,
Monroe. Yes.
through you, I think the Bahamas should stay tuned to see if there is a Columbus primary, if Columbus primary survives this administration. So the Columbus statue is, I'm told, at the Ministry of Works. It would be a matter to see if Columbus primary survives this administration, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Wayne Monroe. Senator Fox, please proceed and talk to the chair.
Madam President, I will continue my communications through you.
Yes.
But through this communication, I seem to be getting answers
Yes.
that I'm aligned with. Madam President, I don't I do not rise to reopen that debate. I promise you. I raise the question, and I rise to make a suggestion. If the space outside Government House is empty, let me lay something on the table. Let us put up a statue of a Bahamian hero. And I cannot think of a better one than the woman who lives inside those walls today, Cynthia Mother Pratt, the embodiment of the Bahamian dream. We gave her a hall. Let's give her a statue. But Madam President, perhaps that empty pedestal reflects something deeper, a national struggle. We've spent centuries being discovered by other people, apparently, defined by other people, described by other people, and somewhere along the way, I fear we've become addicted to their validation. The validation of foreign governments, the validation of international organizations, the validation of the rating agencies, the validation of anyone willing to tell us who we are. But Madam President, a nation cannot build its future on the approval of others. Our validation must come from our own integrity, our own character, our own confidence. Because if we live for the approval of others, we will one day die by their rejection. Madam President, I find us in a curious place. We removed that statue, but we kept the throne. We celebrate independence, but we hesitate to complete it. We praise our ability to govern ourselves, yet we still seem unsure whether we trust ourselves.
Chair recognizes Senator Honorable Latre Rami.
Madam President, I don't want you to maybe not knowingly mislead the public, but 4 to 3 years ago, the statue was vandalized, and someone decided to damage the statue, and the Ministry of Works removed it. I think my last remembering is that there is an intent to repurpose and refurbish the statue, but there's been no decision on whether the statue, whether it will return or not.
Thank you, Senator Honorable. Please proceed, Senator Fox.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Senator Ramming, for that clarification. Very helpful. I'm sure the Bahamian people will appreciate that information. You mentioned the vandalism. I think there was a lot of vandalism in our history, going way back. Madam Speaker, I said, yet it seems unsure whether we trust ourselves, as if once again we are waiting on someone else's permission, serving someone else's dream. So let me ask, well, I can't ask the Senate, I'm saying let me ask the Senate a simple question. Madam President, can I ask you a simple question? How would we define the Bahamian dream today? Madam President, I have to ask it plainly. What is the Bahamian dream today? Can we define it? I could go around this chamber, which I'm not allowed to do, I learned that just now, and ask every one of my colleagues, with your permission, Madam President, and if I walked outside and asked 10 people, 10 citizens on the street, would I get the same answer? I'm not sure I would. On the other foot, if we look at the American dream, people all over the world know exactly what it means. My hope is that the Bahamian dream would be that clear to everyone around the world. Let me try and find out if it's still alive for us, Madam President. In the speech to the throne, it gave me a place to begin. Her Excellency described this nation as one built for the ordinary Bahamian, who deserves, in her words, a fair chance to work, to build, to own, and to rise. On that, I think we all agree. That single line is the closest thing Parliament has come to defining the Bahamian dream: to work, to build, to own, and to rise. So let me take the government at its word and ask the honest question again. Is that dream actually reaching the Bahamian people? Madam President, is the Bahamian dream alive and well? Well, it depends. If your dream is to get a job at a hotel, drive a fresh Honda with clean rims, and have enough money to party on the weekend, then yes, that dream is within reach. If your dream is to get lucky instead of getting better, that dream is thriving. There are more gambling houses today than ever.
My Lord.
Is your dream, if your dream is to hit,
Shameful.
if your dream is to hit a lick, then yes, that dream is doing just fine. Allegedly, some negotiate deals in Parliament and their colleagues pretend like it never happened. If you voted a certain way this past election, I'm sure you've been told your dream is alive and well. But Madam President, if your dream is to grow your purchasing power, to build real wealth, to own a piece of the rock, that dream is getting harder and harder. If your dream is affordable living, quality health care, and a pension you can retire on, a lot of Bahamians are beginning to wonder about that dream too. And Madam President, that should trouble every one of us in this room. Because too many of our brightest young people still believe their future lives somewhere other than here. Yes. We are so shaped by American culture that for many Bahamians, the Bahamian dream has become to live like an American. For generations, the dream was to leave, to find opportunity elsewhere, to build a life elsewhere, to raise a family elsewhere. Some of us want a piece of the rock, and some of us just want off the rock. Like Rick, huh? Let's hope they come home like Rick. Let's hope they come home like Rick, yes. Senator Watson. And let's hope, oh, sorry, Madam President. Madam President, let's hope they come home like I did. And let's hope they're welcomed home. We'll work better at that in the coming years. Here is what is fascinating. Outsiders often see the value of this country more clearly than we do. For a young man sitting in Port-au-Prince, the Bahamian dream is worth risking his life across the ocean. To him, this place is a lifeline. It is survival itself. For a billionaire who makes the Bahamas his second home, the best sun, sand, and sea on earth, the Bahamian dream is a private island in paradise. Our proximity to America is a luxury. Our way of life to them is a luxury. That is why they move here, invest here, raise their families here. So it appears, Madam President, the Bahamian dream is alive and well for everyone except perhaps Bahamians. And that tells us something. It tells us there is a tremendous value in this nation. The only question is whether we still recognize it in ourselves. Madam President, not all dreams are created equal. Many dream of sitting in this chamber. Many dream of leading this country. Some dream of building something. Others dream only of taking something. Some dream of service. Others dream of status. Some dream of leaving a legacy. Others dream only of holding on to power for as long as they can. And here, Madam President, we must draw a line. There's a difference between a dream and a fantasy. A dream requires effort. A fantasy requires luck. A dream requires discipline. A fantasy waits on a bounce. A dream asks, what can I build? A fantasy asks, what can I get? Too many of our people today are waiting on a number, waiting on luck, waiting on somebody else to change their circumstances. Madam President, that is not a dream, that is a fantasy. And this may be the saddest part of all. Senator Watson, through you, Madam President, we do not always celebrate one another's dreams, especially those when they leave the country and return. Too often we believe that for me to win, you must lose. Too often we tear one another down. Too often envy and pettiness becomes the barriers to our own growth. Yes. We cut off our nose to spite our face. We discourage ambition. We criticize success. And then we wonder why our best keep leaving. Madam President, my dream is a simple one. My dream is for the Bahamian dream to sit at the table, the same table as the American dream. Because, Madam President, I know the American dream. I know it well. I left home at 15. And for those who keep insisting I've been living in Canada, let me offer a quick geography lesson. I finished high school in Indiana. That's the Midwest of the United States. I went to college in North Carolina. That's the East Coast of the United States. I was drafted by the Boston Celtics. That's in the northeast of the United States. And I settled in Los Angeles to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, to work in Hollywood, and that's the west coast of the United States. For nearly 30 years, I've lived between the Bahamas, which is my home, and the United States. Just like thousands of Bahamians who leave home chasing education, opportunity, and success. I say I lived the American dream. To say I lived the American dream would be an understatement. The NBA, Hollywood, TV, movies, business, I'm about as close to the textbook definition as you will find. But Madam President, I was not the first. Long before me, there was Michael Thompson. Long before me, there was Sir Sidney Poitier. Today, there's Buddy Hield, Jazz Chisholm, and many more. And let me go beyond athletes and entertainers. Bahamians who built businesses, Bahamians who became executives, Bahamians who became innovators, people like Fred Papal, who rose to be the president of Beck Construction and the president of the U.S. Golf Association as a Bahamian. People like Dr. Denton Gibson, the head innovator and scientist at SpaceX. People who have competed and won at the highest level in the world that the world has to offer. Trust me, Madam President, these Bahamians were dreamers, and they are out there in the world, and they are no small fish. But here's the difference, Madam President. Growing up, my hero was not Michael Jordan. It was Michael Thompson. My hero was not Denzel Washington. It was Sir Sidney Poitier. Now, it certainly didn't hurt that I was later mentored by Michael Jordan, and it certainly didn't hurt that I later worked with Denzel Washington, but my dream was never the American dream. It was a Bahamian dream, because there is something powerful about seeing someone from your own street, your own neighborhood, your own country do something extraordinary. Madam President, let me take you back. I was a young boy who couldn't find, believe it or not, Senator Simmons, a pair of shoes. I couldn't find a pair of tennis shoes as a kid. I went to the wrong shop. I went to Mike's on Wolf Road. You didn't sell the Mike's on Wolf Road? Sorry, I can't speak to the senator. Sorry, Madam President. But let me tell you what, Madam President, I had to wear as a kid in school. I had to wear construction boots to school, big yellow construction boots, because they didn't have size 13. They only went up to 12. Senator Simmons knows this. I couldn't find a pair of size 13 shoes in Nassau. And as a kid going to school, I was embarrassed. To this day, I kid you not, I believe I lost out on a girl because of those big construction boots. I am convinced. Now, in fairness, you don't think it was that, Wayne? No? You had some construction boots too? Now, in fair, that was you, Wayne? No, I'm just kidding. Madam President, I'm sorry. Now, in fairness, nobody probably was going to date a boy in big yellow construction boots. I don't blame her. But you know what, Madam President, one day my father took me to a shoe store on Wolf Road. I'm sorry, on East Bay Street. Mike's was on Wolf Road. This shoe store was on East Bay Street. It was Michael Thompson's store. He'd come home from the NBA, and for the first time, I found a pair of tennis shoes that fit. A red and white pair of Air Force Ones. And I can still remember holding them, the smell, the feel. And in that moment, Madam President, I had a dream. Not because of the shoes, but because of the man who owned the store. The man was on the billboards. The man who played in the NBA. He lived right around the corner from me in Blair Estates. His Bahamian dream became my blueprint. Before I ever played an organized game of basketball, and this is after the Speaker of the House, Hal Moutrie, was my coach, I told my high school coach I would make it to college and get drafted into the NBA. When I got to Boston, they asked me what I wanted. I told them I wanted to play 12 years like Michael Thompson. And I wanted to win 3 championships. I wanted to go a little further than he went. I told my friends I was going to marry Miss America. Madam President, you know how that one worked out. That is the power of dreaming. A dream lets you see a future before anyone else can. Madam President, My father had dreams for me too. He dreamed I would become a lawyer, like so many of you in this chamber. He dreamed that one day I would serve my country, like I'm doing right now. But even with his own dreams for me, he loved me enough to let me chase my own. My father left school in the 8th grade. He traveled the world. He built a life. He met my mother. And then he came home. Before he opened the first ice factory in this country, he was selling used cars across from New Oriental Cleaners on Mackey Street, Naskin Auto Sales. And he taught me something I have carried with me my whole life. Sometimes you leave home to grow, but you come home to build. And that, Madam President, is the whole point. The American dream facilitated my Bahamian dream. It never replaced it. I married Miss America, yes I did. I raised Bahamian American children. I was offered at one point American citizenship, but that was never my dream. And for anyone still confused, let me say it one final time. I have one passport.
Yes.
One citizenship.
Yes.
One country.
Yes.
And one dream.
Yes.
A Bahamian one. My dream was always to make my family proud, to maximize every opportunity, and then to come home, to serve, to contribute, and to build. Madam President, when I look at the Bahamian dream through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I see something both revealing and concerning. For too many Bahamians, the dream ends at a good job, a reliable car, a mortgage, and a pension. Now, those are very worthy things. But a great nation's dreams, Madam President, cannot end at comfort and security. The true measure of a nation is not whether our people can merely survive. It is whether they are free to create, to innovate, to lead, to leave a legacy. Madam President, this is the thread from my maiden contribution. Good is the enemy of great. The challenge before us is not simply to make fellow Bahamians comfortable. It is to make Bahamians capable of becoming everything they were created to be. That is economic independence. That is the unfinished half of 1973. And so, Madam President, my Bahamian dream today is simple. That wherever a Bahamian is in the world tonight and today, in Miami, Atlanta, you name it, Toronto, London, anywhere in the world, in Nassau, in Freeport, from Abaco down to Mycal, wherever we are, that they never stop believing that their dreams can come true there, here, and at home. I don't want them ever to stop believing that home is worthy of fighting for and protecting, that one day, no matter where they go, that they can bring back everything they've learned, every skill, every business, every innovation, every child they've born, and every dream, and help make this country the greatest version of itself. My call tonight is simple. The Bahamas must dream bigger. The Bahamian dream must become so compelling that our own people believe in it again. So powerful that the Bahamians abroad want to come home to live it here. So inspiring that our young people see their future here in it. So attractive that the world wants to be a part of it. Because our dreams tell us where we're going. And before we decide where the Bahamas is going, we must first decide what the Bahamas dreams of becoming. Madam President, as I bring my contribution to a close, I am reminded of the poet Langston Hughes. He wrote a poem called Harlem. Most of us know it by another name, A Dream Deferred. And in it, he asks a simple, haunting question. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it wither and dry up? Does it sag under its own weight? Or does it finally explode? That poem, Madam President, gave a play its name, A Raisin in the Sun. And that story carries a special weight for us all, because the lead role, Walter Lee Younger, was played by one of our own, Sir Sidney Poitier, a Bahamian, a man who lived his own version of the Bahamian dream. In one of the most powerful scenes ever written in film and television and stage, Walter Lee is pouring out his dreams, his ambitions, his vision for something greater in a scene. And every time he speaks, he is dismissed, told to be quiet, told to think smaller, told in so many words, eat your eggs. Because to the people around him, the breakfast eggs mattered more than his dream. Madam President, throughout history, there have always been people ready to tell the dreamers to eat their eggs, to be realistic, to stay in their place, to stop reaching, to stop believing. But the founders of this nation were dreamers. Sir Lyndon Pinling was a dreamer. Sir Milo Butler was a dreamer. Sir Cecil Wallace Wakefield was a dreamer. Mother Pratt was a dreamer and still is a dreamer. Michael Thompson was a dreamer. Sir Sidney Poitier was a dreamer. And every generation of Bahamians has been carried forward by men and women who refused the limits others tried to place on them. So today, Madam President, I leave this chamber with one question. Have we deferred the Bahamian dream? The dream of ownership, the dream of independence, the dream of national confidence, the dream of transformation? Have we stopped asking what this nation could become and settled for what it already is? Because I believe, Madam President, the Bahamas is still a nation of dreamers. I believe, MJ, that there are young Bahamians sitting in their homes, some in the gallery today, with dreams bigger than their circumstances, bigger than the expectations anyone has placed on them. And to them, my message is simple. Do not defer your dream, MJ. Do not abandon your dream, MJ. Do not shrink your dream, MJ. And whatever you do, do not let anyone convince you to simply eat your eggs. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ulrich Fox, for your contribution. Before we proceed to the next senator, the chair wishes to recognize Consul Shireen Poitier Johnson from the Bahamas Consulate General in Atlanta, Georgia, who's in the gallery today. Can you please stand? Thank you, Shireen. The last time we met as a Senate body, we mentioned your name and said that you were listening in Atlanta. And so it's a pleasure to have you in person today. And I look forward to speaking with you immediately after the proceedings. And thank you so much for coming. And thank you all for coming to the gallery. Unfortunately, I don't have all of your names, so unfortunately, I am unable to introduce you, but we appreciate your presence. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Keno Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. Like many of our colleagues have stated earlier about the tragic incident that took place over our country. So, Madam President, before I begin my contribution, I give all honor and all glory and all thanks to Almighty God for the gift of this day, this brand new month, for His grace, His mercy, His continued guidance. It is only through His grace and His strength that we are able to gather in this honorable Senate to serve the people of our beloved Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Today, Madam President, we as a country mourn those precious lives. Let us keep their families in prayers, as you have mentioned earlier, asking God to grant them strength, comfort, and peace during this time of unimaginable grief. This reminds me that these tragic incidents also serve as a solemn reminder to all of us of the importance of exercising greater care, responsibility, and patience on our roads so that together we can help prevent further loss of life. One of the young ladies by the name of Bianca Marcathorn is a graduate of Temple Christian High School, who I had the honor of mentoring over the past few years along with my daughter. And it was so great to hear her voice on the phone just 2 days ago when she spoke to my daughter by saying she is honored to be alive. Even though she's waiting on surgery, she's honored to be alive. And one of the most profound things that I heard, she says that we were so eager to get out of high school to have a good time, to go to all the parties, wherever they are. But she's understanding life more now, that this fast life of living does not worth it. And so she is privileged that God has saved her, that she may be a living testimony for others. And so with that being said, she's at Princess Margaret Hospital under good care. And so I had to ask the question because my good colleague here always criticized hard. I said, are the people taking good care of you? And she said, Daddy Wong, I'm in excellent care at PMH. And so with that being said, may the soul of those departed rest in eternal peace and rise in glory, and may God continue to comfort every grieving family. But also, Madam President, I would like to extend condolences to the following families who live in the community of St. Anne's. Mark Bastian from Nassau East North, Phyllis Williams, Winton Drive, Lady Holly Knowles, who was 101, who predeceased by her husband, Sir Dewitt Knowles. Also John Bethel, Rosalind Neely, Carolyn Bartlett from Dix Point, Sidney Rogers, Nathaniel Dean, Nathaniel Bonfield, Ralph Watson. I don't know if that's our Senator Watson family. Yes, that's my uncle. That's his uncle. All these individuals have contributed to the development of St. Anne's and in their respective neighborhoods. But one of the saddest news I received yesterday, Madam President and my colleagues, is an individual that I've grown to love in my local assembly at Evangelistic Temple. Just brotherly hugged, shake hands. I talk about his rings on his finger because he have these knuckle rings, you know, they're so designed so well. And to find out yesterday that my brother in the Lord, Kenny Nixon, passed away suddenly. And it truly taught us as men that are part of our men's ministry that the day you can be here and the day you can be gone. And he left behind his wonderful wife, and when you see one, you see the other, Lily. And I know that she is going through a rough time because they were knitted closely together. And to the family of Evangelistic Temple, I extend condolences to all of us. As Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 remind us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. A powerful scripture that speaks to both leadership and life. These words remind us that every vision, every project, every community we seek to strengthen must be anchored in God. Madam President, I now take this opportunity to thank Her Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Cynthia Mother Pratt, our esteemed Governor General, for her gracious delivery of the speech from the throne, which outlines this government's agenda for the next 5 years. Our Governor General has served our country with distinction. Many of us have been welcomed into our home, into our neighborhood where she lives, and of course, at Government House. But Madam President, I'm honored to know, and it always is a profound joy, that our Governor General also shares a special day with my late grandmother, Cypriana Wallace Stubbs. They celebrate a birthday on November 5th. And so I can never forget her birthday as well. Today I rise and support the work of our Ministry of Urban Renewal, which I am bound to say that I find joy in following urban renewal and the community relations and the Ministry of National Security with the National Neighborhood Watch Council, whose mission is simple but powerful. Urban renewal restores communities, strengthens relationships, and the National Neighborhood Watch strengthens safety with our Royal Bahamas Police Force, and together we restore hope. Madam President, urban renewal strengthens communities through practical assistance, while community relations strengthens the partnership that allow these communities to flourish. Together, they remind us that strong communities are built not only with infrastructure, but with people, families, neighbors, and of course, with unity. Today, I recognize and wish to recognize a few community leaders and volunteers who seek to make our beloved country a better place to live, such as Portia Corbell, Barbara Hare-Byrne, Edna Glinton, Jeff Cooper, Randy Hanna, Omar Thompson, Alan Adley, Carlos Carey, Verna Barnaby, Monique Bethel, Richard Chestnut, Cheyenne Chipman, and Patrick Ferguson, and so many others throughout our country. These individuals have worked tirelessly in their respective communities to consistently help the Royal Bahamas Police Force to build safer and better neighborhoods. Our government mandate is that we want every Bahamian to live peacefully in their communities. Mom and pops want to come home safe, and these individuals are volunteers that continually work tirelessly to make sure that when their families are coming home, that they are there to be there for them as eyes and ears in their communities. Madam President, at the heart of the Ministry of Urban Renewal and the Ministry of National Security is the belief that every Bahamian deserves to live with dignity and safety.
Yes.
Whether it's providing running water to a family for the very first time, replacing unsafe outdoor sanitation, repairing homes, or constructing wheelchair ramps for seniors and persons living with disabilities. We are doing more than improving houses. We are restoring dignity, independence, and hope. Our urban renewal centers continues to serve as places where citizens find support. And I must say this as I visit the Nassau Village Community Center last week Friday and spoke with the managing director there, Mr. Mitchell, to see the pride that he takes in taking care of the Nassau Village Community Center, a state-of-the-art community center, one that I hope soon will come into the Eastern Corridor for St. Anne's. But knowing that I see the senior citizens and the young people that visit this center and the way they conduct themselves put a great smile on my face. You see, these places where citizens find support, practical assistance, and solution, they represent government at its best, meeting people where they are, working alongside them to overcome life's challenges. Madam Speaker, Madam President, community transformation cannot be achieved by government alone. It requires partnership with churches, schools, community organizations, the private sector, citizens working together towards a common purpose. As we strengthen these relationships, we strengthen our communities, and ultimately, we strengthen the Bahamas. Our government commitment extends to every island, every settlement throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, whether it's in New Providence, Grand Bahama, or any other family island. Every family deserves compassion, opportunity, and safety. The safety and security of the Bahamian people remain among the highest obligation of the state. This led government by Philip Brave Davis demonstrate that our government will continue to fully implement the Protection Against Violence Act and expanding domestic violence support services throughout our country, because we believe everyone deserves a second chance. Madam President, every day someone is waiting for hope. A senior needing a safer home, a younger person seeking guidance, and a family in need of basic necessities, or a person living with a disability striving for greater independence. This is why this government exists. This is why this government cares. This is why this government loves. And this is why the Bahamian people chose progress. Yes. Our responsibility is not simply to respond to needs, but to empower people, strengthen families, and build resilient communities and neighborhoods throughout our country. Madam President, my contribution is very short today. As I close, I return to the words of Proverbs 3:5-6, which reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Public service is not about titles or recognition. It is about serving with humility, restoring dignity, and leaving our communities better than we found them. Madam President, when history reflects in this honorable Senate, I hope it will not simply count legislations that has been passed, but instead, let it tell the story of families whose lives were changed, seniors who remain safe in their homes, young people who found encouragement, and communities that discovered hope through partnership and compassion. Madam President, as a senator, I reaffirm my commitment to the Bahamian people, and especially to the wonderful, loving, passionate residents of St. Anne's, whom I love and appreciate. I want to personally, as I close, to thank all of the fathers who attended our first Father's Day event, where we had over 300 fathers along with their families pass through.
There you go. There you go.
Our office continued to remain open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
That's it.
As we continue to listen, we will continue to serve, we will continue to build partnership, we will continue to strengthen communities. And for the record, Madam President, my office remains open on Johnson Road, opposite the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. Has never closed. It remains open for the people of St. Anne's.
That's it.
We will continue to work every day to improve the lives of Bahamians, families throughout St. Anne's and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, because our pillars remain clear and focused.
Speaking about the president.
All right? Empowerment, security,
Yes.
senior citizens,
Yes.
youth,
Yes.
education, home development, and business opportunities. And today, Madam President, in the galley, I'm happy to have Mr. Randy Bannaby, who came to show his support here, as well as Mr. Luby George, my son Christopher, along with my mom Antoinette. It's always a joy when you can have family and those who lives in your communities and who support to come into the Senate. And so today, I am grateful that our Governor General, speech from the throne, and I want to say to all of us and those who are listening, especially those, my family who are in Atlanta, Georgia, my Uncle Lester and my Auntie Nitzer, who consistently tune into this Honorable Senate. And to everyone who listens online, let us live in love. Let us show peace. Let us be kind to one another. Let's remember that we are all one as Bahamians. May God continue to bless this Honorable Senate and the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and our beloved nation. Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Keno Wong, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe.
Madam President, I thank you. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to rise in this honorable chamber to stand on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for which, if I can be a bit biased, Madam President, the people of Carmichael are also a part of. And to make my contribution to this resolution to thank Her Excellency, the Governor General, for her most gracious speech from the throne. Before I do so, Madam President, I would like to join in with the condolences that have been extended to the family of those from among us who lost their lives to traffic fatality over the past several days. I know many were moved by the death of the teenage girls. I myself, Madam President, I'm the mother of 2 teenage daughters, and so it was quite moving for me. It was also moving for my daughters, who came downstairs very sorrowful, understanding that the frailty of life extends not just to older persons, but even persons within their own age bracket, and how quickly life can be taken away from them. And they themselves knew persons who knew the individuals, and so that impacts young people even more. And so I would like to continue to extend prayers and sympathies to the family. We pray for their loved ones. We pray that the peace of God, which surpasses all man's understanding, will guide their hearts and their minds. And we'd also like to pray for the survivors, and Senator Wong mentioned one of them. And I think sometimes we underestimate the difficulty of the persons that are left behind who were a part of the tragedy. They themselves may be struggling with certain emotional feelings over the next couple of days and weeks and months ahead. Some may have survivor's guilt. Some may rethink things in their minds, what could have been done differently. And so we must continue to pray for them and pray for their peace and the peace of those that have to help them through this journey. Madam President, before I thank Her Excellency, I would also like to congratulate some of our neighbors and our friends. Firstly, I'd like to recognize the fact that yesterday, one of our close neighbors, Canada, celebrated Canada Day, which is the day that brought together 3 provinces on the 1st of July, 1867, that made Canada an independent country. While they still remain a dominion of Great Britain, they have political independence. Canada is a close friend of ours. Their banks have been here for many years. Their banks have helped to build this great nation that we all represent. Their banks have helped to build Bahamian homes, Bahamian businesses, and contribute to the standard of living that we all enjoy here. Our children school there, primary school, high school, and there is a growing diaspora of Bahamians that are leaving our shores and taking up residence there. And so I would like to extend congratulations to them, to our Bahamian diaspora that is there, and we pray that our partnership will continue for many years to come. I would also like to extend congratulations to our closest friend, the United States of America, on the occasion of their 250th independence. All of us having a commonality, Madam President, having been a part of the great British Empire. An empire that once said the sun will never set on, but that did not age very well. The United States as well accommodates our young people, many Bahamians, a diaspora certainly far more larger than the one in Canada. And we see the United States not only as a friend, but as partners, and dare we say family. The relationship between our two nations has been mutually beneficial, and we pray that it will continue to do so as well for many, many years. And despite the conversation that was had earlier, Madam President, where my colleague mentioned the fact that we may be going on a 3-month vacation, I take this liberty also to extend congratulations to the Bahamas on the occasion of our 53rd independence, just in case we do not return before July 10th. This is a great nation that we all love. We all stand there despite our differences. We all want the best for this nation. And I pray that God will continue to bless us, strengthen us, take us from faith to faith, strength to strength, and glory to glory. Madam President, Her Excellency is a trailblazer, one who has accomplished much and contributed significantly to the development of our nation. It is no wonder that before and after the conferment of the deserved title of Dame Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George on Her Excellency, many Bahamians called her and continue to call her Mother. Her life story is one of perseverance, determination, and service. I have had the good fortune of conversing with her during my journey in public life. She has always been gracious, encouraging, inspiring, generous in the offering of words of wisdom and advice at every opportunity. Her Excellency has demonstrated love, compassion, and genuine care for the Bahamian people. She is responsible for the success and the lives of many young people in her community. Certainly the community where she came from, the community in the Grove, a community that I myself, Madam President, once lived, 6th Street in the Grove to be exact. It is only fitting that she holds the distinction of being the first female to be appointed as Deputy Prime Minister and also served as acting Prime Minister during her term, and actually had the distinction of presenting a budget in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Perhaps I think she's the only female that has done so. I stand to be corrected. Madam President, I had one of the most humbling experiences in my life when several years ago, I had the opportunity to participate in a Mother's Day campaign that was being put on by Diamonds International, where they had selected 4 women, including Her Excellency, Mrs. Belinda Wilson, a trade union legend and icon, Mrs. Minnerly Hanschel, a humanitarian par excellence and church elder of Great Commission Ministries. I was blessed to be in the midst of greatness. The following caption for one of the promotional materials of that event properly describes Her Excellency with unmatched precision. Nothing, and I quote, "Nothing speaks louder with timeless beauty than a woman who has obtained success through her life's work and the way she carries herself," end quote. I could not find better words to summarize Her Excellency and what she epitomizes. Madam President, Her Excellency delivered the speech from the throne with grace, eloquence, and confidence. The hope of a nation now rests on the fulfillment of the outlined goals, objectives, and promises. Bahamians are praying. These are much more than fancy words and political rhetoric. We all want to see our government and country succeed. The success of our government is a success for all of us, the Bahamian people. This is why the official opposition is committed to the work of the government and working with the government and other stakeholders to create a better country for our people. In addressing the areas as outlined in the speech, Madam President, the PLP in its blueprint for change in 2021 admitted, and I quote, "The cost of living is well beyond the means of middle and low-income Bahamians. We will review minimum wage to phase in livable wage." This commitment was made, Madam President, back in 2021. Unfortunately, the cost of living still remains the biggest issue confronting Bahamians today, and arguably could be drawing persons toward the poverty line. Her Excellency rightly noted in her speech that, quote, too many Bahamians still feel pressure from the high cost of living, too many young people are still searching for opportunity, and too many small businesses still face barriers to growth. This is the reality that Bahamians face in our country, Madam President. With a rising high cost of living, a stubborn youth unemployment pegged at 18%, taxes and fees and the poor ease of doing business that continues to negatively impact small businesses. This is why the government must move, Madam President, with a sense of urgency to use all the tools available to it in the form of fiscal policy, economic policies, social policies to bring relief to our people. Madam President, during the budget debate, I spoke to the high prices of gas and the fact that the government has a profit margin on gas as there's price control. The government also received taxes on the fuel that we receive at the pump. We know that in the upcoming weeks that we hope that we will continue the tradition of the VAT holiday that is extended on school supplies. And we would petition that that holiday is extended to other items, including gas, which, while we cannot have control over the conflict that is taking place in the Middle East and the geopolitical tensions that are being experienced around the world, we can do whatever is possible for us to do here on the local front. And if that means taking a discount or giving up some revenue for a defined period at the pumps for Bahamians, then we should do that. That includes taxes and profit. Might I remind the chambers that there is a projection of a $200+ million surplus in the next fiscal year, and so I think it's possible, it's small things. Madam President, I would also like to reiterate a point that I raised during the budget debate, and that is the fact that while we acknowledge the decrease of VAT on unprepared foods and grocery items, that reduction continues to be exempted rather than zero rated, which in the example that I gave, any cost accruing to grocers and business owners is going to be transferred to the consumer because they would not be in a position to claim tax credits. And so we would like for the policy that was implemented by the Free National Movement, which is a zero-rated policy on these items, to return as opposed to the exempted policy, which continues to still place a burden on the consumer. Madam President, we will scrutinize the government's plans to introduce modern competition legislation, advance a consolidated investment incentives framework, establish a robust national investment policy, implement the Land Adjudication Act and register land act. We will discharge our duty as an official opposition to ensure that these policies, legislation, and initiatives accrue ultimately to the benefit of ordinary Bahamians and not a select few. Yes. Madam President, Her Excellency also raised the point in her speech of the issue of state-owned enterprises and the fact that the continued subvention and subsidies that is extended to these public enterprises have on the public purse. I quote from her speech, "My government will also require state-owned enterprises to submit binding business plans with clear performance milestones aimed at reducing long-term dependence on government subsidies. Madam President, during my contribution, I had indicated the fact that just 10 years ago or thereabouts, the subsidies and the subvention to these state-owned enterprises were in the range of $400 million. They have now moved to a staggering amount of $700 million as projected in this 26-27 fiscal budget. As I indicated back then and during the period of the heads, I wanted to know if these plans would be put forward so that we are able to reduce the reliance of these entities on the public purse. Simply because understanding the challenges that are facing the Bahamian people, the fact that we need to build better roads, maintain our roads, build schools, repair hospitals, build hospitals, clinics, all of the public goods and services that Bahamians expect from their tax dollars, the more funds we are able to free up on these entities or from these entities, we are able to invest into those programs that will benefit the Bahamian people. The diversification of our economy, Madam President, is very essential, and we support the commitment to move toward the development of the creative economy, or as some would call it, the orange economy. And the Minister for Economic Affairs also mentioned the groundwork that is going to begin with the blue economy. And we've also heard of the investment into agriculture. We applaud the government for the Creative and Performing Arts School of the Bahamas, CAPAS, but we implore the government to dream bigger because our people are so talented. You would have heard my colleagues speak about the persons that have left our shores and have become a success, particularly in the creative community. Whether that is Senator Fox himself, or Sir Sidney Poitier, or Lenny Kravitz, or his mom, Ms. Roca. We have many persons who have gone on to become a success globally, global icons. And there is more that we can do here on the local front to develop that industry. And at the same time, Madam President, we speak about Grand Bahama and the Family Islands, because I used to think Grand Bahama was a perfect place for the development of the creative economy, because so many of our creative icons reside on that island and have come from that island. Some of our best plays were written by Grand Bahamians. Some of the best production was put on by Grand Bahamians. And the land is there, the people is there. But the people of Grand Bahama have gone through a very trying time over the years. Their issues confronting their recovery from hurricanes such as Jane and Francis, and unfortunately of late Dorian, is well documented. And the Grand Bahamians have been waiting for a return of what we used to call the Magic City, bringing the magic back to Grand Bahama. And in the Blueprint for Change, the people made several promises to upgrade the Rand Memorial Hospital, to bring about new airports, shelters, and a master plan, not just for Grand Bahama, but for Family Islands. And this was mentioned in the speech from the throne, putting forward development plans for the Family Islands, but we've heard this talk before, Madam President. We heard this in the 2021 Blueprint for Change. And 4.5 years later, the people of Grand Bahama are still waiting for relief. They're still waiting for development. We have heard of the Grand Lucaya Hotel being sold. We've heard of the money being in the bank, and we have gotten no evidence of that. And we're still waiting, Madam President. The people of Grand Bahama are still waiting. And in the second city of this nation still does not have a world-class international airport. And so these are things that it's nice when we read speeches, but we must understand that these words, behind every word on the papers that we read, there are people, real lives, who are being impacted and waiting for the promised relief. It was also indicated that in conjunction with the National Development Plan, a strategic plan for each island will be put forward. And Madam President, we must continue to be careful not to make the Bahamas, Nassau, or New Providence centric. I acknowledge the fact that the Prime Minister is from the Family Islands, grew up there, was educated there. I also acknowledge the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister is from the Family Islands, grew up there, was educated there. We speak a lot about that, but the development of those Family Islands are not moving at the pace that we would expect them to do so. Not only that, Madam President, if in the 2021 Blueprint for Change you indicated that they would put forward plans to develop the Family Islands, and 4.5 years later, those plans are not in effect, then what is going to happen over the next 4 to 5 years? Because we know that age-old saying that if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. So we would like to see these promises moving from the paper, Madam President, and moving from speeches and moving to reality. Moving to reality. Well, Grand Bahama still doesn't have an airport. I mean, that's facts. Okay? Speaking on workers' rights, Madam President, Her Excellency also touched on this. I think we all agree that the greatest resource in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas are the people of this nation. In the same vein, the workers of this great nation are the backbone and the cornerstone of our economy. They are the ones that make the engine of the Bahamian economy turn across the sectors. We salute the leaders of the labor movement, many of those who have helped to improve the standard of living of many Bahamians and helped to put in place multiple programs, policies, regulations to look out for workers in this country. And I would be remiss if at this time I did not acknowledge the work of the late Sir Randall Fox and all the work that he has put forward for the labor movement in laying the foundation for what many of us are the beneficiaries of today. And I encourage Bahamians to read his autobiography, The Faith That Moved the Mountain, Madam President. It was a book that I was introduced to at the tender age of 18 when I was a student at the College of the Bahamas, when my government and politics lecturer, the late Felix Bethel, introduced this book to us. At that time, a legend in our society, the one and only Felix Bethel. At that time, Sir Randall was reintroducing or reprinting his book. The sad part about that event that we had, Madam President, where he was republishing his book and introducing it to a new generation, persons like myself, was the fact that a hero like that, a legend like that, was running behind the Bahamas government just for adequate compensation, pension. Our heroes, my colleague spoke about it, statutes. We need to celebrate the leaders of our nations more. We need a National Heroes Row. We need a place where our young people can go and dream and be inspired and know the names of these individuals, and they never die.
Absolutely.
We go inside our square and we see Queen Victoria. We used to pass Government House and we see Columbus. We used to pass the Hilton Hotel, or what was known as the Hilton Hotel, or the British Colonial Hotel, and I believe it was Blackbeard. We see all of these persons. Or Woods Rogers, yes, it was Woods Rogers. Yes, all pirates. Right? And we talk about how we expel the pirates, but they are plastered all across our society on parade, and we cannot see structures and statues and monuments of the people that helped to lay the foundation for the work and for the benefits that we all receive today. And so I hope and pray that this is a part of the plan in terms of developing our national heroes and taking that to another level, Madam President. But Madam President, the Free National Movement is proud of its record in advancing the rights of workers with the introduction of minimum wage. I heard a member speak to the fact that it was increased, and it was in fact increased on 2 occasions by the Progressive Liberal Party administration, but the foundation was there for the increase to take place, Madam President. And I did some research to find out what was the purchasing power of the then minimum wage when it was introduced, of $150 introduced by the Free National Movement. Yes. The purchasing power of that today would be approximately $300, depending on which indices you use or which metrics you use. You can get it up to $350. So it just goes to show that the minimum wage, which sits now at $260, is still inadequate if we talk about the purchasing power and the fact that the PLP themselves in the Blueprint for Change, they committed to increasing the minimum wage, which they did, but phasing toward a livable wage, which $260 is still going to be inadequate to help our people and to get them to where they need to be. Added to this implementation of the minimum wage, we can speak about the enactment of the landmark Employment Act of 2001, the creation or the facilitation of the National Tripartite Council, and the introduction of unemployment benefits, something that Bahamians greatly benefited from during the pandemic and COVID in 2020, and still to this day, persons who are in between jobs benefit from the unemployment benefits, a program that was put in place by the Free National Movement. I often hear the other side say that they are the party of the people. But if one were to really examine and to zero in on the policies of the Free National Movement, then we would have a very clear picture of the policies that have actually benefited the Bahamian people, particularly in recent years. We look forward to reviewing and debating the proposed Employment Bill 2026. No doubt it will build upon the work that the Free National Movement has laid down in the Employment Act of 2001. And in our review, we will seek to ensure that the law favors Bahamian workers while having regard to the interests of employers to ensure that this does not adversely impact our economy. It is encouraging to note that the establishment of a National Productivity Council is on the government's agenda, and we welcome this initiative. Now, Madam President, food security, I think there is a general consensus across the nation that we need to produce more of what we eat and what we consume.
Eat your eggs.
And when we look at the challenges that we are prone to face, external shocks and factors like a pandemic, and if I might, Madam President, it seems as though disasters and challenges seem to come on the decade. If we look at 1987 with the Great Recession and the way that it impacted the Bahamian economy, it impacted the unemployment rate, it impacted inflation, or if we go to 2000 and 2001, where we had to deal with the dot-com experience that was taking place globally, as well as the 9/11 attacks that impacted not only our tourist industry for persons having fear of travel, but also our financial services industry in dealing with not just things that we were looking at before, money laundering and narco trafficking, but also CFT, right, the counter-financing of terrorism, which became very prevalent at the turn of the millennium. And then just a short 8 to 10 years later, we were dealing with the global financial and economic crisis that again had a negative impact on the Bahamas, our unemployment rate, the cost of living, and the challenges that we were facing here. And then, of course, the biggest whammy of them all for those of us of this generation, Dorian in 2019 and the pandemic in 2020, there seems to be an established pattern of challenges confronting us on the decade. And if past is prologue, or I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but if we can look to the future, then we can expect something. We hope for the best, we pray for the best in the coming years. And so with that, Madam President, we were a bit concerned about food security, even in the most recent challenge that we were confronted by, which is the pandemic, and the fact that we were concerned as to whether we would be able to supply our people with food. The good thing is during that time, the government, the Free National Movement government at the time, had buffered our external reserves to ensure that we would have the foreign currency that is needed to be able to purchase those goods and to be sure that we would be able to continue in trade. But we still must do more, Madam President, to ensure that food security is at the heart of any diversification that we're going to do of our economy, any security that we're going to provide for our people, because God forbid that we would not have access to food because we are depending on another country that might be facing its own challenges. This is why I support any initiative to reduce our food import bill and move us towards self-sufficiency. We welcome the proposed establishment of a national import substitution framework and introduction of tourism agricultural incentives. But we must be more intentional, Madam President. I remember when I was the managing director of the Bahamas Development Bank, I had the opportunity to attend many high-level meetings, and many of them in the region. And I remember a specific meeting that we went to, I believe it was Barbados, where there was a gentleman who rose to the floor and he said that the Europeans, they love sweet potato. And there was a shortage of sweet potato in Europe, as communicated by him. And he said to himself, why didn't we all in the Caribbean get together and have a common agricultural policy, whether it was codified or whether it was on an understanding, that we all get together and we decide that we are going to grow and produce sweet potato and export it to Europe. That is a way, Madam President, that we can expand our gross domestic product. We can move toward more diversification of our service-based economy in tourism and financial services toward becoming more of a productive society, and ensuring also that we are arriving at economies of scales by partnering with our CARICOM partners. And another area that I hold near and dear, something I explored during my time and tenure at the BDB, was agribusiness. And this whole idea of canning goods. I mean, we get tuna off the shelf, we get sardine off the shelf, we get salmon off the shelf, but you cannot go in the store and you cannot get snapper or turbot, all of these fish types that we have in abundance in our seas. And so looking at having things 24/7 or year-round, we need to be looking more at agri-processing and how we are able to develop that and make that also another sector in our society that helps to grow domestic products, create more secure jobs, and of course provide the food security that we are all seeking to achieve. Now, Madam President, the last time I was here, I spoke about the unreliable nature of our electricity and the fact that many persons were complaining about the lights not being able to stay on, Madam President. We are going through a heat wave at this time in our country. We are experiencing heat levels like we have never experienced before. But yet persons are suffering. It might be a strong word, but you know, when you're in the heat and you're not feeling too good and you're dripping sweat, some people say are suffering in this unbearable heat with the lights not staying on. And still there's also this issue that is arising now that bills have not been distributed.
What they have? They've gone up.
They've just, yes. And there was, Madam President, we were wondering why the bills were taking so long, but now we understand. How can you release these bills and justify the high cost of these bills when it was promised in the blueprint for change that the cost of electricity would go down? And when I was here last, I actually shared information that demonstrated that on average, the bills were really going up as opposed to coming down. Yes. So, Madam President, I went to my freight forwarder to pick up some goods that I had ordered online. Power was off. My Lord. The power was off, and I thought, they said they were closed. I said, why? The power is off. So I went next door because I wanted to get a coffee, and this was in the middle of the day, Madam President. I wanted to get a coffee. I couldn't get a coffee because the power was off. Shameful. So not only is the unreliability of electricity impacting citizens and impacting the general public, it is also impacting businesses. In the height of the day, businesses are losing crucial revenue. So we must, again, I stress, Madam President, move these words, these nice words, from the white paper, because the old people used to tell us paper would sit still and let anything write on it. We need to move these things from the paper and move them to action. We are tired of the nice words. And BPL, Bahamas Power and Light, or Bahamas Grid Company, whether by themselves or together, need to get their act together sooner rather than later, Madam President, because it is too hot for this. And as I move toward my close, Madam President, I want to speak about technology and transformation. The COVID pandemic sped up the pace of digital transformation and forced many organizations around the world to evolve in order to survive. The Bahamas was no exception to this phenomenon. Individuals and companies alike were forced to embrace new technology. This was a continuation of the ongoing advancement in technology over the years, from mainframe to desktop computers, from dial-up internet to broadband internet, from local area network or LAN to Wi-Fi. We have seen the emergence of blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. Technology is changing before our very eyes. While we must embrace technology, we must also ensure that there is a robust governance framework in place and the associated risks are properly managed, Madam President. The e-government My Gateway has been a welcome development, but it has not lived up to its potential. I tried to use it on multiple occasions. I find myself still going into the establishment to conduct the work that they said is online. And funny enough, I get an email 3 months later telling me that my application is being reviewed. If I had to wait on that, Madam President, I would be in contravention of the law. There are still too many manual processes in the delivery of government services, and the bureaucracy within the platform is frustrating to users. The proposed establishment of a national digital ID system, while welcome, raises genuine concerns about data protection and security, which must be addressed by the government. I recall that during the introduction of the National Insurance Card years ago, it was touted as a card with a chip that could store data and evolve into a national ID card. Now here we are years later, we are discussing a national ID card system again. How much will this cost taxpayers, and what measures will be put in place to mitigate against the associated risk? The government has promised to introduce an Artificial Intelligence Governance Act to govern the use of AI. While it is important that the government ought not to stifle innovation, it is also vital that the abuse, misuse, and unethical use of AI is addressed by legislation. This is important for the protection of Bahamians from malicious actors. Madam President, I turn now to the important topic of national development. The National Development Plan was mentioned at least 10 times in the PLP's Blueprint for Change in 2021. I read it. I counted. At that time, the PLP promised to implement the National Development Plan within a 2-year time frame. That would have taken them to September 2023. We are now in July 2026, 3 years later, at the time that it was supposed to be implemented. It is our hope and prayer that the government will actually implement the NDP for this real time. If it was fully implemented, then we would not have in the speech from the throne that we would be putting forward plans for Family Island development. Transparency and accountability are important pillars in a functional democracy. Presumably, this is why the PLP promised in its previous Blueprint for Change. And these are all things, Madam President, that is being reiterated in the speech from the throne. To fully implement the Freedom of Information Act an Integrity Commission Bill, Anti-Corruption Act, Campaign Finance Reform, Code of Conduct, Whistleblower Act, Electoral Reform Act, etc. Regrettably, this commitment was not met with action. The full implementation of FOIA remains outstanding, and other promised reforms have not been implemented. Despite the low amount expressly allocated to the implementation of FOIA in 2026-2027, we do acknowledge that the Minister of Finance has indicated that there is an allocation to further implement this program in other budget line items, and we hope that to be the case. The implementation of FOIA should be prioritized by the government during this term. This should be a part of the implementation of a broader good governance framework, which the government had committed to implement if they are to be taken seriously. Based on our recent experience with the 2026 general election, it is clear that the modernization of our electoral system must go beyond biometric voter cards and electronic poll books. We need real electoral reform, which includes campaign finance legislation, an untraceable ballot system, an independent parliamentary registration department. The absence of these reforms will continue to undermine our electoral process. Madam President, I thank you for this opportunity to once again be able to contribute on this resolution, to thank Her Excellency. And I would like to also just take this opportunity to recognize one or two persons in the gallery, Mr. Umbrister, Ms. Cooper, members of my team. But I would also like to recognize the presence of one Mr. Grayson Roberts. That is the next head boy for Queens College in 2026, 2027, in his final year, and his mom, who is present in the gallery with him, or his grandmother. He attends school with my daughter, Madam President. They are entering their final year of high school, and we wish them every success. Madam President, may God continue to bless the people of this nation, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe, for your contribution. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Keenan Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President. Rise on a point of order. I didn't want to interrupt the honorable member's speech, but I just want to potential misleading points that were raised. 2 points. I did a quick review because I just wanted to confirm, but it is my understanding that the National Tripartite Council was established and passed in both houses in 2015. That would have been while the PLP was in government. The honorable member would have inferred that it was something that was implemented under the Free National Movement. So I just wanted to clarify that point. The next point is that she spoke to livable wage, and the fact that what is currently in place in terms of minimum wage isn't livable wage, and pushing us to do so. But if I recall, on both times that we implemented an increase in minimum wage, it came with some pushback on the basis that we were disadvantaged, we were being a disadvantage to the employers in terms of them and the businesses, and how that we would cause so many persons to lose their jobs because of the increase. And so again, that is misleading. That is misleading to say that they are now pushing for livable wage, when on both occasions they pushed against livable wage because of those arguments. So I wanted to clarify those points.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Keenan Johnson. Senator the Honorable
Hi, yes. I just on a point of clarification, was it indicated that I said that we were pushing for a livable wage? Madam President, just clarity on that. Is that what the senator just said? Because that's not what I said in my speech. What I said was that the PLP, in its blueprint for change, said that they would increase minimum wage with a phased transition to livable wage. And I was highlighting the fact that they had not done so as yet. That was the point that I was making. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kevin Simmons. Senator Simmons, you have the floor.
For my cancer checkup. And when I got the result to say that there was no sign. Oh, I can't remember what I said. That part was off the cuff. Okay, I would just like to again extend my condolences to the people of Cat Island who are all very dear to me. I too am a descendant of Cat Island. I had the opportunity to speak to most of the family, in particular Stanley Webb, whose daughter was a music major and doing quite well. And to have lost her at this time was just tragic, but God knows all things. I also would like to say my disappointment in what was on social media with the supposedly driver who was expressing some weird actions, I thought, in relation to the accident. Maybe he's still in shock, I don't know. But it was not too becoming, I thought. And as I said, Madam President, God knows all things. I'm a standing testament. As you know, last week I was in Minnesota for my checkup, and when the doctors revealed to me that my recovery is, and I like this word, remarkable. And when they said to me, I thought of some other institution that referenced remarkable. But when they said to me, I am where I should be in 5 years, and it's been 3 years, God is good. But Madam President, I rise in support of the motion of thanks for the gracious speech delivered from the throne at the state opening of this Parliament. And let me firstly thank Her Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Cynthia Pratt, for delivering that address with grace and the quiet authority the Bahamian people have known in her across a lifetime of service. She gave this country a great deal long before this occasion, and we have heard it early in this place. And she gave this occasion its dignity. Madam President, the speech we are answering is not an ordinary one. 8 days before it was read, the Bahamian people went to the polls and returned this government to the office for a consecutive term. This country has not done that since 1997. Our people who have lived through hard years do not hand back a mandate out of habit. They weigh the work and they decide whether it should continue. They decided that it should continue. That is humbling, and it asks something of every one of us in this chamber. There's something easy to forget on the winning side of an election, and I want to say it plainly. The deepest thing that happened 51 days ago was not that one party prevailed over another. It was that a free people in a region where free people are not everywhere guaranteed went quietly to the polls, rendered their judgment, and saw it honored without a single window broken. That is amongst the rarest things a nation can possess. Those of us it favored this time should be the last to treat it lightly. I want to read this speech the way I have read most things in my life. As a man who has made things in this country, Senator Fox, I have made a payroll. I have turned Bahamian hands and Bahamian materials into a finished Bahamian product and sold it. I have sat with an electricity bill that would decide whether a small plant ran another month or not. So when this speech turns to small businesses, to light industry, and to enterprise, I do not read it as theory. I read it as the ground I have stood on. There's a great deal in it to welcome, and I want to be specific about why. The government commits to modern competition law to protect against price fixing, against the abuse of market dominance, and against unfair pricing. Madam President, I have watched the dominant supplier set a price a small Bahamian maker simply cannot meet, and then call the result competition. It is not competition, it is leverage. A fair competition regime is the small operator's only defense against being squeezed out by size, and I welcome it. The speech commits to import substitution and to sourcing more from Bahamian farmers and producers and manufacturers. Let me tell you why that one matters to me. Light manufacturing in this country is barely 1% of what our economy produces. 1%. For an archipelago that imports nearly everything it eats, wears, and builds with, the figure should trouble every senator in this room. Every case of water, every loaf, every bottle, and every pair of shoes, Senator Fox. We make here, instead of landing from abroad, is a Bahamian wage that stays on Bahamian soil. We have let that sector sit at the margins for generations. The intent in this speech is to pull it back toward the center in the right intent, and it is overdue. On energy, the government commits to local content and training obligations, to relief on the duties that burden energy-efficient appliances and renewable systems, and to consumer protection code with real force at OICA. I spent years in the country's energy industry, so I will say plainly what that section means. Our power costs roughly twice the world average. That single fact that has killed more Bahamian manufacturing than any foreign competitor ever did. Any serious move to bring the cost down is a serious move to make Bahamian's production possible, and the government is doing that. I read the commitments to Grand Bahama with particular interest because, again, Madam President, Grand Bahamas where I matured. Because I gave years of my working life to that island's industry. Grand Bahama was built to make things and to move things. And the speech sets out, again, as a gateway to the Caribbean for trade and logistics. It has waited a long time for a plan to what it was built for, despite the fact that in previous years, Freeport, Grand Bahama had 4 ministers, and nothing moved. That's right. Madam President, I speak from experience. I lived there. I moved to Grand Bahama in 1968. I left Grand Bahama in 1990. I know for which I speak, and I'm there almost every opportunity I have. The speech also promises mandatory timelines on development approvals and a simple rule that a citizen should not have to give this government the same information twice. And that's important because in the old days, you had to submit everything over and over and over again. This government has seen the need to centralize. And I welcome this, Madam President, because I come from a background, we called it then data processing. As a former computer programmer from the 70s up to the 90s, I see the change, and I welcome the change, and the government is definitely on the right track. The first computer that communicated between the Bahamas and California at Balco, I wrote the program. And so I know what communication is. These sound like housekeeping. They are not. When a young man is waiting on approval for premises, he rents. He pays his rent, or an entrepreneur. He pays his rent and then have some time to wait before they can start business because of the old system that used to be around. That is no more. A timeline on decision is not an administration to a small business, it's oxygen. I welcome, too, the new protection this speech offers our digital creators and their work. As an employer, I do not read the commitments to workers' rights as a burden laid on businesses. A worker treated fairly and kept well builds you a better product. I say it again. A worker treated fairly and kept well builds you a better product and stays to build the next one. I can boast, Madam Speaker. Most of my employees have been with me for over 15, 20 years. Good employees have always known that. Madam President, I would welcome this speech section by section, and it would be honest work. I would be filling this chamber, though, if I stopped short. The speech is honest enough to admit that economic statistics alone do not capture the daily realities facing payment families, and that too many of our small businesses face barriers to growth. I want to take the government at its words, and I will. And the same barrier this speech offers will give that oxygen to small businesses. Most of the time, Madam President, my focus would be just on that, these barriers. We sometimes speak as though this country has no money. That has never been the problem. The problem is where the money sits and what it is permitted to do. The Prime Minister put it plainly himself at the Business Outlook. He said, Bahamians have no credible access to funding beyond consumer loans and mortgages, and that our own banks will not lend to our farmers and our fishers. When the head of a government says that out loud, it is not a complaint, it's a diagnosis. And every Bahamian who has been turned away at a counter knows how accurate it is. Our banks are sound, and they are profitable. They hold substantial liquidity idle, sitting there doing nothing. And they post strong profits after year, while a young Bahamian with a real plan, a real market, and no collateral still cannot get past the counter. We are not a country of short capital. We are a country of whose capital has not been taught to sit still, who has been taught to sit still. Let me be careful with the word reform because it is easily twisted. I'm not asking anyone to weaken the rules that keeps our banks safe. The soundness of our financial system was hard won, and I will defend it in this chamber. I am asking that we put sound institutions to productive work and that we use the tools this country already has that it owns. The Small Business Development Center has now channeled well over $100 million to Bahamian entrepreneurs. This is the right thing to do. Financial institutions need to see a Bahamian startup as a customer to win rather than a risk to refuse. Madam President, this is where this speech owns promises connect, and I want senators to see how. The government commits to a central searchable land registry and to ending the delays that haunt property transactions in this country. My Lord, it never takes too long, Madam President. Oh, sorry.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Madam President, I move that the Senate sit beyond 1 p.m. so that Senator Simmons may finish his contribution.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
There's been moved and seconded that the Senate will sit beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many hours in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate will sit beyond the 1 p.m. hour. Senator Simmons, can you please resume your contribution?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, as I said, banks, and I'm saying banks, must not see potential entrepreneurs as risk takers, but future customers. Madam Speaker, land is one thing that is vital to most people in securing loans. It's not medical convenience. For most payments, land is the only collateral they will ever have. A man who cannot prove what he owns cannot borrow against it, and no bank will lend to him without it. So picture the very farmer this speaks to, and he's asking to grow more of what we eat. He sits on family land he's worked for 40 years, and he cannot pledge an acre of it because the title was never made clean. Clean title, and you have done more than tidy a registry. You clean up the title, that person can go to the bank. This speech sets out to do that. You have now turned that farmer into a borrower, and his land is now capital. One reform that this speech is doing makes that possible. This is the wall this speech begins to build, and capital is the brick that holds the rest in place. Madam President, the speech closes with a line, "I will carry out this chamber." It says, "This nation was built by Bahamians who believe that ordinary people deserve the fair chance to work, to build, to own, and to rise." I remember when that promise was made, and not yet a fact. I remember Bahamas, where the counter a man could stand at was decided by the color of his skin. My generation tore that counter down. We won the vote, and we won the country. The counter that stops the Bahamian today is a quieter one. It is the bank counter he cannot get past, the loan he cannot reach, the capital that will not see him. We did not win this country to leave that last counter standing. To build, to own, and to rise. A Bahamian who can start a firm, fund it, own it outright, and pass it to his children is a promise kept in full. That is the work this Parliament inherits, and that is the work this Parliament will do. And I intend to spend my part in it making sure that the last counter comes down. I support this motion of thanks. I thank Her Excellency for her address. I thank the Bahamian people for the trust they have placed in this government. And I commit in my own small part to being worthy of it. Madam President, for those in light manufacturing, small business owners, and budding entrepreneurs, when people are knocking you down, this budget will not let them knock you out. I say happy Independence Day, Bahamas. May God bless this Honorable Senate, and may God continue to bless our Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Kevin Simmons. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Trevor Johnson. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Madam President, I now move that the business of the Senate be suspended to 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
3 p.m.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of the House shall be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many ayes in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The business of the Senate stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.